everyone. I'm your host, Scott Ryan. This is It's Our Time, and today we have Welcome to It's Our Time with Scott Ryan. I'm your host, Scott Ryan, and today we have a jazz musician, Brian Kirk, who played the drums on Sycamore Trees. And if you haven't got my newest book, Always Music in the Air, it is all centered around sycamore trees. You know, I always had this idea. Sycamore Trees was in episode 29 of Twin Peaks and was performed by little Jimmy Scott. And one of the things is they said David Lynch improv'd episode 29 and throughout the script. But I was like, how do you improv little Jimmy Scott? How do you improv a song? How do you improv Brian Kirk on drums? This was always a question I had. So when I set out to write Always Music in the Air, which covers all of the music of Twin Peaks, kind of the driving thing is to have I wonder if you guys can hear that saw. My neighbor saws from morning to night, always sawing. Never hammering what he saws, it's just sawing. I don't know if this is cutting out the saw, but what's the deal on the saw? What's he building in there? So anyway, the book, he stopped sawing. Let's just enjoy silence for a second. That's nice. And so I was trying to find out things about sycamore trees. I published the book, and then I met Brian Kirk in real Twin Peaks days where he performed, and I was like, oh, I would have loved to have you in the book because he adds a lot of context to this mystery. We don't get into the mystery here because you got to read the book to find out the secret behind sycamore trees. But what you'll find out here is how Brian played the drums, how David Lynch directed him, and some of the sounds he helped create, which would then go on to be in Fire Walk with Me. So enjoy Brian, and if you're in Chicago area from April 11th through April 20th, come see me and Daniel Knox. We will be at the Music Box Theater, and we'll be showing David Lynch films every day. I'll be hosting the Q&As. We're going to have Mark Frost, George Griffith, Dwayne Dunham, Mary Sweeney, other people, Richard Green, Charlotte Stewart. It's going to be very, very exciting. Come out and join us, watch a David Lynch movie. I'll be there with my books, signing them, and doing all the Q&As. I can't wait to talk to Mark Frost and everyone, so it's going to be a great time. That's at the Music Box Theater in Chicago. You can pick up my book at bluerosemag.com. And for now, let's check in with Brian Kirk, who gives us some great David Lynch stories and working on sycamore trees. You know what? First, let's hear a little Jimmy Scott.
And I'll see you, and you'll see me, and I'll see you in the branches that blow in the breeze. I'll see you in the trees.
Today we have a jazz musician with us, Brian Kirk. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Oh,
Glad
we'd
to be
love
here.
to have you. And why Twin Peaks fans will be interested about this is Brian actually played the drums on Sycamore Trees, and I got to see him perform on vibraphone just a couple weeks ago in the real Twin Peaks. How was that experience playing the jazz club at, was it Bogart's? Was it Hogarth's? Something
Boxley's?
Boxley's. Yeah, there,
Boxley's, yeah.
Boxley's. How was that night for you?
That was great. It was a love fest of all the David Lynch fans and the musicians, and it was surreal actually because having done this recording back in the early 90s, I had no idea that it would be such a popular thing.
How did they know to do that? Like, how did you get mixed up with those guys?
I was working with Jimmy Scott and the Jazz Expressions when he came and made his comeback from actually a 35-year hiatus of not singing. And we did a lot of shows in the New York area, New Jersey area, Peppermint Lounge. We did a few things. And then Jimmy hooked up with Harriet. God, what's Harriet's last? The agency in Los Angeles. I'm trying to think of her name. It'll come to me. And then we started getting gigs in LA. And one thing led to another. We actually did some things at Catalina's and other then the biggest one was the hotel, the Roosevelt Hotel. We were playing in the Cinegrill a lot. And we had like 2 or 3 weeks, and all these people that had never seen Jimmy in 35 years, known him from the Savoy record days and all the recordings he did with Lionel Hampton, Everybody's Somebody's Fool, and all those things. Um, they came out. I'm talking about Flip Wilson. I'm talking about Margot Hemingway. I'm talking about Nancy Wilson. It was an amazing amalgamation of people that came. Alec Baldwin and all these Horace Silver, just all these people that loved Jimmy from back in the day and didn't know and welcomed him back. So from that led to a call from the bass player that said, "Hey," when we got back to New York, he said, Jimmy's got a recording session with this filmmaker named David Lynch." And I was like, okay, that sounds great. I mean, hadn't done any films before. And I said, "Who's David Lynch?"
It was the bass player Ron Carter?
The bass player was Hilliard Green, who was
Okay.
actually with the group. So it was me and Hilliard, Kenichi Shimazu. We were the main trio, and a guy named Alvin Fleith. So the tenor saxophone player that you hear on Fire Walk with Me was Alvin Fleith. He still
Okay.
lives in Queens. And so Alvin was on the gig. And so we literally did all those gigs in LA. And then we got called to do this thing with David Lynch in Midtown Manhattan. So I went to the recording session, and from there, events took place.
That is so cool. And I love this. And, going back to Jimmy Scott's comeback, what were
Yeah.
you guys performing out there in LA? Because maybe you don't know this, but David Lynch was in that audience at the Cinegrill in LA.
Wow. No,
So
I
he
didn't.
came to see you.
I see.
And that's how
There's
we found out about Jimmy Scott. And that's
I
why this
see.
happened, which I uncovered in doing the book on how Sycamore Trees happened. So
Wow.
what were you guys performing in at that LA gig?
Where?
You
Oh,
know,
we
what songs? Like what was Jimmy's like big
Mother,
hits then?
all
Or
of Jimmy's repertoire. Doesn't Leave Love Me. We actually did a record that that brought Jimmy back because the first thing he wanted to do was record his own music. So it was called Doesn't Love Me More. But we did all those things that Jimmy were famous for. We did somebody's fool, everybody somebody's fool, Motherless Child, which is the real song. It's close to Sycamore. I'm sure that Sycamore Trees was inspired by Motherless Child.
I'll check
And
it out.
we did a lot of Imagination. Um, there's a lot of tunes from the Tin Pan Alley that Jimmy did standards, mostly ballads. That was kind of interesting gig because I was a brush player and my I came from a family of a drummer who was a master brush player. So when I got to gig with Jimmy, it was just like, "Dad, hey Dad, I'm playing with Jimmy Scott. A lot of brushes." He's like, "Yes." And, and so yeah, it was a lot of ballads, but the biggest influence I think on Sycamore Trees for David was Motherless Child. Because I don't remember David being there, but that's amazing. I just remember people's mouths open, how much he would draw them in. I mean, just totally the audience was you could hear a pin drop. And it was just amazing the emotion that Jimmy had from those songs. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but Jimmy lost his mother at a very young age when they were crossing the street and they stepped off the curb and a car was coming and she pushed Jimmy back onto the curb and she was killed.
Oh my gosh, no, I didn't know that.
Yes. So a lot of that emotion and that crying, what they used to call him crying little Jimmy, crying, the crying little Jimmy Scott, comes from the idea that he was a motherless child and he was raised by his grandmother after that. And it was Jimmy and three other, his one, two, three, four, four total, three sisters. Yeah. And he
Crazy.
told me, and he told me that at the Center Grill. I mean, when we were at the Roosevelt Hotel, these are all the stories I kind of heard from Jimmy. I was like, wow.
That's crazy. So now you get this call that David Lynch wants you to come in and do a number. At that point, what did you know it was going to be Sycamore Trees? Did you have the music ahead of time? Did you get to practice? I mean, how'd that work?
No, that's interesting, huh? I had no idea. First of all, I had no idea who David Lynch was. I asked Hill, I asked Hill Green. He started laughing, and I just called him like a couple of weeks ago, and I said, Hill, why did you laugh about when I said I didn't know who David Lynch was? He said, I didn't know who he was. I said, oh, I thought you were making fun of me. He said, no, I didn't know who he was. But Hill couldn't make the engagement, right? So because he said, look, I got this gig in Boston. If the weather's bad, I'm not going to be able to get back. He just kind of knew it. So they hired Ron Carter to do the date. And so for for Sycamore Trees, I came in, and there was a drum set there in the studio, of course, which is New York. You just do not want to move drums, trust me. And so I had my cymbals and my sticks. And Hill said, before we came to the day, bring a bow. I said, a bass bow? He said, yeah, I have a bass bow and I'll let you use it. One that's kind of like some, it's hair, it's a true horsehair, but it's not my best bow, so you can have it. And I said, well, why do I need a bow? He said, they want you to bow some cymbals or something. And I was like, okay. Because I had done that in 20th century music through Lou Harrison music in college. So John Cage, Lou Harrison, all those guys kind of had those effects using the bow. And so I kind of know how to do it because we did it in those concerts and in percussion ensembles, what I'm saying. So when I got there, there was no music. Um, I think there was maybe no, I don't even think there was a chord chart. I think Angelo and David really just wanted it raw. They wanted you to use your ears and they wanted to have no preconceived notion of what was going on. The piano player, though, and Alvin Flight had music before. They had chord progressions, right? That they had. So there was no rehearsal. We just kind of talked, once I got all set up, did a sound check. They just told me that it was going to be a ballad featuring Jimmy. And you can try brushes. We're not sure if we're going to use all that, but we would just want you to kind of create sounds. And I said, okay. So we started playing the song. Pretty much it. Um, and I think
That
Ron came,
nerve-wracking, or does that happen sometimes where you just come in and maybe you have no music and you don't know what you're doing?
not a recording session. Most recording dates, you kind of have an idea of the music. I mean, I've done other things for like when we did Philadelphia, there was music for Jonathan, what's his name? Jonathan Denny.
Jonathan Demme, yeah.
Yeah, Demi. Yeah, his thing. A Rage in Harlem, we had music for because Jimmy's on that too. So, but no, normally, especially for film, it's not like, it's not directional in terms of verbal. It's usually some kind of something written.
That's crazy. So,
It was crazy.
and then I think that it says it in my book for sure, but I think it's take eight that they use. I think we
Oh,
discovered. So you must have done it a couple times, I guess.
we did it. Yeah. So it was take eight that you actually
I'm fairly
talked about.
Yeah, I know that Dean Hurley is David Lynch's sound guy, and he found the original tape and got me
Wow.
the date that it came and what take
Wow.
it was. So I know it's in my book. I feel like it's take eight.
Wow. Now, yeah, we did a number of times. that particular song. It was kind of like do it in the morning, take that break, a little break, come back and do another take. Then we broke for lunch and then do another take. And I think Ron Carter came in later after that. And but yeah, it was just kind of I think yeah, it was come to think of it, Scott, it was the piano, saxophone, and me. And I think Jimmy did scratch tracks so we could kind of hear what the songs. I didn't know what the song was. It was a beautiful, hauntingly beautiful song. I was like, whoa, this is really something. But it was like this first time I heard it.
Yeah. And then what about Ron Carter? So he comes in and he has to be a hero to you. Is this the first time?
Yeah, man.
What did
Yeah. And
you do him?
the thing I said about it at the concert is like Ron Carter, I grew up listening to Ron Carter since I can remember because my dad is a jazz musician who grew up in Indianapolis with the Montgomery brothers. He lived across the street from Wes Montgomery's grandmother. So my dad has been on the scene in Naptown for years, and we moved to California. So all the records I have of studying Miles and Ron and his work, and then I saw him with his piccolo when he's playing piccolo bass with his quartet. So I used to see Ron all the time. I mean, I lived in San Francisco. There's a Keystone Corner. That's where I lived in terms of a teenager just going down there and seeing every act that came through. So when I got to New York to go to NYU, I had never hooked up with Ron because he was on that different level, right?
Sure.
So when you get to New York, you're on a certain level when you play gigs that you're working your way up to that next level, blue note, that kind of thing. Um, and so Ron came in and I had a million questions, right? I mean, it's like, man, I was going to talk about 1960. I was going to ask about 65, 66, the things with Miles and all those things that he did with Tony and Ron Herbie and Wayne. And his jaw was wired shut because he just had orthodontist surgery. I was like, oh, no, are you kidding me? All the times that I could have hooked up with Ron Carter, he couldn't talk to me. So Ron came in, listened to what we were doing, and he did the most beautiful bow work I ever heard on this particular song. It just is incredible. I see why David and Angelo hired him, but and then he left. He left. I was like, oh my God. I just worked with Ron Carter on tape and never said a word to him.
Oh my
So
gosh, that is crazy. So
isn't
what
that
does
nuts?
it have to do with your bow and the cymbals?
Oh, so the idea is when you take a horsehair bow and you literally can like you would bow a string, you would bow the edge of the cymbal or the edge of the cymbal, and it would give you like a whistle, almost a really high-pitched whistling sound. If you can imagine a whale's cry, when you whale underwater, dolphins underwater, whales with really high-pitched ring, that's what happens. And it lasts for a little while, especially with the cymbal. So I had the bow, and then Angelo said, did you bring the bow? I said, yeah, it's right here. He'll loan to me. He said, would you mind bowing the large cymbal? And so I had to put rosin on. You had to put rosin on it to really get it smooth. And it took me a little time to really set up the bow and really get the arc, the actual connection between the cymbal edge and the arc of the bow to make it go up and go down and just try to get it. So Angelo said, "What? Why don't you try arco? They call it arco. Would you try arcoing up first?" And I did that, and it was kind of too short. And so what I did from the very bottom of the bow, I went all the way down really long, and it just went. It lasted a little while. I was like, wow. And they kind of looked at each other like this and said, can you do all the rest of this? I had a bunch of symbols there. He said, can you try the little symbol, the hi-hat symbols with open, you're not closed, but open? Can you do the crash symbol, blah, blah, blah. So I did all the bow work on the symbols where I had to rosin it again and make it happen and make it really smooth. And so by the third time, I really was able to get that sound immediately. So I was like, man, these guys are creating soundscapes, I guess, because I didn't expect to come and do this. So
Right. Did he ask you to do anything else that was strange?
yeah, that's funny that you asked that. So they were like, okay, well, look, that sounds really good. Can you do me a favor? And you know that big symbol, yeah, can you take it off the music stand? We're gonna set up a mic on the floor, right? We're gonna set up a mic on the floor, not the carpet part, but the wood part. Because when you first walk into a booth, there's like this whole wooden section where there's no carpet. So can you just like we're gonna set up a mic on the wooden part. Can you just like hold it in your hand and drop it to the floor? I was like, man, are you kidding me? This is a $400, $400 symbol from Zildjian, man. I got in the factory. Are you kidding me? You want me to drop this thing? And I'm thinking, well, okay, well, if I drop it, these guys definitely have enough money to buy another one. I'm sure of that. So so from not all the way above my head, but I just kind of like they set up this little mic and I dropped it and it didn't hit flush one time. First time it didn't hit flush. It was like right, and it started ringing. And it wasn't, it was like, okay, there's like it was a real crash. It was a real crash sound. Crash. And then the second time or third time, can't remember what it was, it actually hit flush on the floor. So it went, and it was a metal sound, like metal hitting a wooden floor, but it didn't ring because it was like the airlock between the floor and the cymbal. It had caught air, and there was no vibration. So literally, it was just with a loud crash. I was like, okay, and they said that sounds great. Can you take those the smaller cymbals and do it again? I was like, no, no, no. I'm not doing that. He said, oh, yeah, we get it, we get it. Because what happens if you hit it the wrong edge, it'll crack, and that's it. It's over for that symbol. So that was one thing. Then the last thing, I think, yeah, that was, I'm trying to remember this bow, dropping cymbal. Oh, yeah, the last thing was they asked me to take the snare drums off of so the drum, the snare drum has wires sitting underneath what they call the snare head. There's the batter head on top, and then there's a snare head with wires, um, almost like a cage that attaches to the bottom, so it creates that snare effect. And so they asked me to take the snares off and scream and put my face into the head and just scream as loud as I could, like "Ah, ah, ah," whatever I did. And I went, okay, these cats are kind of strange, but okay. I'm getting paid, so
Right.
I did it. Did it a couple. He said, "Oh, that was great." David was like, "Man, that was great. Can you like do it just like a little bit more emotion? Just get really loud." And so I just like, I needed the release. New
Yeah.
York, New York is a trip place to live at. So I just screamed my head off into the snare, into the head of the snare, with my lips on top of the snare. They may have used it.
Maybe.
They
Uh,
may have used it.
it is fun to think about because when you talk about dropping the symbol, there's a part in the movie where she opens her hand and it makes this loud noise. And I wonder if it's that. If
But
it's
what in Fire Walk with Me?
yeah, be
Huh.
interesting.
Now I got to watch the movie again because I just kind of it went over me because I was listening for my stuff. But yeah, there is a. It could be. It could
Yeah,
be
it's
if
just
it's
a
a metal,
brain.
almost a. Is it a metal crashing sound almost? It
Well,
sounds like that.
it's this really loud sound. Was it that? Did you hear that?
Yeah, do one more time.
Do you think it was that?
It could be.
Because it's
Because
like what you were just
yeah,
saying that it kind of got the sound because it could be reversed or whatever, but
exactly. Yeah, and I forgot about that. They literally could have put a phase shifter on it and reverse the sound. Could be that.
because it has that sound of it like sucking air out. You know what I mean?
and went "Shah," and that was it.
I don't
Eh,
know.
it might be
Yeah, who knows? I've always just wondered what that sound is because
interesting.
it's a crazy sound in there. Um,
Huh.
did you see the movie then and think, what the hell? Because the song isn't even really in the movie.
Sycamore Trees.
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, I saw the movie. I was like, wait a second, where's the song?
Yeah, it's actually in episode 29, which is the last episode of Twin Peaks, is where they
Right.
actually have Jimmy Scott. But the song came out on the soundtrack because they use a little bit of the instrumental in the movie, like literally a little
Ah,
bit, like 3 seconds. But um, but that's why it's in the movie or I'm sorry, on the soundtrack for
on
the,
the soundtrack.
but it's from the TV show.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I saw the movie. I mean, it took me a little while to really, I was, when was it? 2 years, maybe 2 years later it came out.
Yeah.
Maybe a year later, 1 to 2 years later when it came out. I was like, oh yeah, this is the movie we did with Jimmy and David Lynch. So I was anxious to see it. Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and
it's
then I got a better understanding of the man that I was actually with for like 8 hours. You
right.
know, I was like, oh, okay, I understand where he's coming from.
Well,
I mean, huh?
then you're the first one that understands where he's coming.
Yeah, yeah, he was a different kind of cat to really relate to. And then I was like, oh, I can see where his head is at in terms of sound for sound's sake. He did mention that. We're in a studio recording. He was like, throw out all the preconceived notion about jazz. And when I heard you play in the clubs with Jimmy, you know what I mean?
Right.
You're swinging or you're doing rhythm time, right? And you're accompanying a musician. He said, don't think about that. Think about creating sound for sound's sake. And I was like, oh, I hadn't heard that since I was in college dealing with the 20th century literature and professors that were really into that style of 20th century music.
Now, when you performed in Snoqualmie or North Bend,
Mhm.
you were playing the vibraphone.
I was.
And would you rather play the drums or would you rather play the vibraphone?
Well, that's a good question. Actually, guys, they've been asking me that lately. And I'm going, it's I've been playing the drums since I was, my dad started me off at age 5, and I've been playing all the time. I toured with the Pointer Sisters, Ain't Misbehaved in years. I'm on a lot of different soundtracks, a lot of different musical soundtracks. Five Guys Named Mo,
Is you is or is you ain't my baby?
Baby, that's right. The way you look is, keeps me down, that kind of thing. I did, 400 of those performances. So the drums are like my first love, but I always played vibraphone in college and when I moved to Seattle. And so right now I'm kind of really into the melody, playing chords and melody and really kind of fronting the band. Since the pandemic, I've gotten more work as a vibraphonist than I have as a drummer, except for theater, of course, musical theater I got coming up. But because there's a lot of duos and trios with no drummerless trios, and definitely solo and duos, just the vibe. So kind of like torn, but I'll definitely take a vibe gig over a drum gig anytime.
Well, it was so incredible to watch you. It was just unbelievable how you can hold these two things and hit all this stuff. I know it's right back there. Is there any chance we can hear a second of it
You know what? It's
or
going to
did
be
Zoom knock it out? Sometimes it will
yeah.
knock it out.
There might be some cancellation. Um,
I mean, it was
on,
just incredible, um, what you
thank you,
guys did that night. It just
thank you.
was so good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're talking about the four mallet technique that I
Yeah, you
use.
hold it at the same time.
Yeah,
And you're not missing any of the notes.
that's a hey, smoke and mirrors. It works. Yeah, no, it's I've been working. I studied in college. and I studied with some really virtuosos of the mallet instrument. Started studying with Jack Van Geem, principal percussionist of the San Francisco Symphony, who started playing at 5 and taught himself how to play marimba. And he showed me some of the greatest techniques there is to actually memorize where the notes are without touching, without seeing them, without looking down at them. And so from there, I just kind of really kind of used his devices to really memorize the feeling of where the notes are. I can feel it without looking at them, so I know where they are. It's great.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I felt that you really understood those songs and kept the melody, but also went off them, like
Good.
it does. But we
Oh, that's
still
a compliment.
knew that
Thank you.
was Audrey's dance, and we knew that was the Nightingale. But you're still improving, but
Yeah.
coming back to the melody, which
Back.
which I thought was impressive.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I spent a lot of time with those songs. I really, I respected Jimmy's approach, and then I respected David Angelo's mu writing. His music is just like incredible.
I know.
So
I don't understand why this stuff isn't jazz standards. I really don't understand it.
it's having been in musical theater and in jazz, I kind of get the thing that not separates the people, but the people that don't cross over kind of understand why they don't. But it's a shame that they don't say, you know what, check out some musical theater scores while I'm playing tunes. Like for instance, Sycamore Trees. Now that I have it charted out, it's gonna be part of my repertoire. I mean,
Good.
it's hauntingly beautiful. So
Well, and it's so funny that
I
you say that because I went up to the piano player during intermission and said, "Look, I've wanted to play Sycamore Trees my entire life. Could I please take a picture of that chart?" And he let me.
oh,
And I've been playing it every day on the piano since I was
see,
there. It's
see,
beautiful.
isn't it beautiful? It really is. It's just that melody itself, it
It's
just
incredible.
and
Now,
the harmonies are real simple. That's the thing about Angelo's music. The harmonies are real like triads. They're triad. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. So there's three notes most of the time, but then when they move from the three notes into a seventh chord, it's just the melody itself has tension in the seventh chord. He uses the melodies of the tensions of the chord to create this incredible feeling. So every time you hit that note in a particular chord, it's just like, whoa.
well,
The seventh,
it's the
you know what I
G
mean?
seventh in Sycamore Trees that is so
Yes.
exciting.
Yes.
I could play that
Yes.
all day.
All day
I,
long.
I'm not a great. You would be very angry with me if we played together, because drummers hate me because I can't really count and I play a song different every time. I just
Oh,
can't play
okay.
it the same way.
Oh, I follow you.
Well, I hope we get to play together at a David
That would
Lynch.
be
I'm in
that would
Chicago, hosting a David Lynch film fest, and I pitched you guys. I said, "Look, I just saw this jazz band, and we should have them come and play." But
yes.
the
Can
theater
we
didn't
come,
want to do it.
please?
They didn't want to put up the
That
money. But
would be that
I'm
would be
gonna
great.
make it happen. We're
Okay.
gonna have it. It's
Cool. Yeah, we have paid attention to that music in particular. The you can tell from Andrew Glenn, the saxophone player, how
uh-huh.
he kind of emulated the sounds of all the saxophone stuff that was going on there. And Michael Glenn, the musical director who gathered all that music together, was real particular in how he to approach it. He didn't really want us to listen to anything else except maybe the Angelo's recording soundtrack of it. But really just think about it conceptually from like watching it. So what I did is I watched some of the movies, because I know that some of the sounds that I did, I specifically heard in Mulholland Drive. Isn't that another film of David's?
Sure.
Yeah, there's some. When I had after seeing Firewalk with Me, I watched Mulholland Drive. I was like, wait a second, that cymbal roll, that the little transitions that he makes with the cymbal rolls,
Yeah.
that's me. It's like I did that because they asked me to roll. Oh, I didn't tell you. They told me to take the mallets and roll the cymbals, right?
Right.
So any cymbal rolls, that's me. I was like, whoa, I see. Okay, I see what they're doing. They're using them as scene transitions.
Right.
endings, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to ask you about my favorite jazz album.
Oh, look at that.
Be able to get on here. This is Leapin' and Loppin',
Sonny Clark.
Sonny Clark.
Wow.
You like, do you know anything about Sonny Clark? And is it strange that that's my favorite jazz music?
No, because he was one of the most unsung heroes of the jazz piano. He had
He's
a
so great. Oh,
beautiful touch, and a beautiful open concept of swinging. It wasn't like, but it was like Bud Powell, but it was like Bud Powell with soul. You know, you could hear the cleanliness of his song, and he had a great. And Tommy Tarrantine's on that record, isn't he? Or either Stanley or Tommy Tarrantine's on the record.
Tommy Tarantine, Charlie Rouse, Butch Warren, Billy Higgins.
Yeah, Billy. I studied drums with Billy Higgins, so I was real fortunate that living in Oakland and San Francisco, guys would come to the Keystone Corner, Yoshi's, and blah blah blah, and I would go up to them and tell them who I was, and they knew my dad, so there was kind of open acceptance. And I used to pick up Billy Higgins and bring him to my house to study drums with, because Billy, can I get some lessons? And he's like, and I'll pay you 100, 110, whatever you want. He said, no, don't pay me. I was like, are you serious? He said, no, don't pay me. Just pick me up. And when you come to the club, you can buy me a drink or something. I don't know. I don't think he was drinking at the time, but buy me a lunch. So I don't know, something. But I was able to study with Billy. It was an incredible experience.
That is so cool. Yeah, my
Yeah.
all-time favorite song is called Voodoo.
Okay.
I love it. It's just, it would be my theme song if I had a TV show
Wow.
that I
You
would.
got great. You got great taste, man. Sonny
I
Clark. I was
listen to
like,
jazz all the
wow,
time. I couldn't believe they had that event out there. I loved it. It was my favorite thing that happened.
it's awesome.
I want to see. We're gonna get you to perform at a David Lynch event because I do a lot of them. We're gonna keep in
Yay.
touch, and I'm gonna get you out there,
Okay.
and
Okay.
and I'll sing Sycamore Trees. No one wants that, but I'll do it.
Okay.
And and you'll play, and it's gonna be awesome.
I got ideas, man.
Yeah, you better believe it. All I have is ideas. That's why I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to ask you a question. How did you get in to researching and then writing about David and his legacy, his film legacy?
Well, I've been doing it forever. I watched Twin Peaks when it was on. It changed my life.
Ah,
Then
there
I
it is.
started a magazine about it, and I've been doing the Blue Rose magazine for the last 8 years, and I've written books about his films. But the
Wow.
music is my favorite part, and Angelo's music. I just think it's beautiful. And there's never been a book about the music before, and I thought I'm just going to cover it. So I wrote about all 290 cues that are in Twin Peaks.
Woo.
So
I remember doing the pilot. We did the pilot. I can't remember what song it was, but we were invited to do this thing, and Angelo was there, but not David. It was the pilot. And
hmm.
so I can't remember what happened, but what song it was. But do you remember some of the songs that
Well, it
happened
would
on the
be
very?
Falling and the Nightingale are in the pilot are the two songs.
It may have been one of those.
Falling is the theme song, so it was probably
Okay, could be.
makes sense.
And I just remember, just the two of them sitting there. And did I tell you the story about when I asked him the question?
Yeah, give us that. Give us
Okay, so like I said, I never heard of David before, and so this was a really treat to walk into it, because I knew that, first of all, the gig money was union. It paid a lot of money. I was like, man, this is great. I was able to buy like a stack washing machine and dryer for the house in Brooklyn. I mean, I just had kids. I needed the money, and it was like, yes. So I get in there and I see David, and I think it was before we played it. Oh yeah, it was before we played a note, because that's why this is so funny. We got the sound check, a setup, and I kind of said, "Okay, cool." He said, "Guys, you ready?" And I said, "Yeah." Hey, David. I just kind of raised my hand. I'm used to like being in classroom, right? Hey, David, what's the movie about? What's the movie about? And he was like, he gave me this look, man. He could have daggers was flowing through his eyes. He looked at me, then he looked at David. I mean, Angelo, and Angelo looked at David, then they both looked at me, and then they looked at each other again. And then David looked at me and said, well, there's a red room. And I went, oh, cool. I got it. I got the whole story now. Let's go. Let's go. And
That's it, man.
that was funny. And so I kind of knew from that, I needed to keep my mouth shut and just kind of like be professional and do my job because these guys are on another, they got another level of thinking. They weren't thinking about, well, I got to tell you a theme so you can get in the mood to record. Nah, it wasn't about that.
Well, you're on another level too.
Thank
That's
you.
our time, and our time's out. And thank you so much for this. It was wonderful.
Oh, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it, man. I hope to play with you singing Sycamore Trees at some point
It's happening.
soon.
We're doing it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, you heard it here first. Brian Kirk and Scott Ryan performing Sycamore Trees at a David Lynch event near you. Won't be in Chicago, but someday it's going to happen. You guys need to see these people. He was so good, the whole band was good, and this music needs to be performed. If you're interested in the music of Twin Peaks, check out Always Music in the Air, and I will be selling them in Chicago. Come by and I'll sign them for you. Pick up your final copy of the Blue Rose magazine. By the time this is out, who knows, they might all be sold out, but go to bluerosemag.com and check out that. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.